How often do you think about Antarctica? It's not exactly the most welcoming place on Earth. While it might seem like a barren and uninteresting continent, there's actually a lot happening beneath its icy surface. Here are 20 eerie discoveries from Antarctica that shocked and terrified the world. Number 20. Wed Sea Nursery. I'm going to do a small spin-off for first entry because there was one creature that I mentioned in there that actually has a unique story all of its own to talk about. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the ice fish. The reason I'm bringing this up in particular is because when researchers went to the Wed Sea to see what they may end up finding there, they didn't only discover a few groups of ice fish, but instead, they found their nursery grounds. That's a special kind of treasure trove for a scientist, but that wasn't the only shock that they were there to discover. The nursery itself was absolutely massive and was the biggest nursery grounds on the entire planet, featuring about 60 million ice fish being present in just one nursery. And that makes up for a whole lot of eggs. The researchers who discovered it were watching it via a camera feed and were naturally amazed, as the fish nests were pocking the seafloor about every 25 centimeters in every direction and also covering an area of about 240 kilometers. Now, that's an insane amount of space for a nursery to cover, and yet the ice fish seem to have absolutely no issues in making themselves at home. To further give you a sense of scale, the 60 million nests were being watched over by the parents. The twist is, by researchers' best estimation, there was one parent watching over 1,700 nests. Talk about a heavy workload. Then again, they are parents, so they're likely used to that kind of thing. It also makes you wonder whether or not there are other nests like this around Antarctica that we just haven't found yet. Number 19. Oldest rivers on Earth. Now, I'm sure that some of you may be thrown by this statement. I mean, after all, if you were to travel to Antarctica right now and set foot upon its snowy plains, you may not think that there are a whole lot of rivers. It's snow and ice as far as the eye can see, and just by the nature of the place and what we all know about temperature, you would think that any water that is still on the surface would freeze within minutes and would not be able to form a river. However, that's where the twist comes into play. You see, you're not going to find rivers on the surface. You need to dig underneath the surface and through the many thick sheets of ice that exist in Antarctica, and then you're going to find some rivers. And not just one river or two, but an entire network of river systems that have apparently been around for 30 to 40 million years. That would indeed mean that these would be some of the, if not the oldest river systems in the world today. Just to give you a sense of scale of how vast the rivers can be, they stretch out for about 1,500 kilometers. So then, why would that be considered a creepy finding and something that would terrify the whole world? Well, first off, it really wouldn't, unless you know the entire population is a bunch of scaredy cats just because some new water sources were found. But what might freak them out about all of this is that people don't like to admit it when they don't know everything. One of the easiest things to do when it comes to Antarctica is just think that it's a bunch of snow and ice and write off everything else that's involved with it. There's a reason why people go to study the place almost year-round and why they've built research stations in different places on the continent. There are mysteries and answers that can only be found there, and as such, you have to look for them in order to find out things about the ancient past, which is something that we'll touch on soon. Number 18. Antarctica seafloor life. Now, I'm going to shift things around a bit and not talk about the landscapes of Antarctica, but the life that is within them and the waters. If anyone tells you that no life is possible there, well, they probably weren't paying attention in school, and they should really be ashamed of themselves. Now, the fact of the matter is life finds a way to live just about anywhere, which also includes in the waters around Antarctica. Sure, it may be freezing cold, but that only means that you need to be tough in order to endure the conditions. And to that end, in early 2025, a unique iceberg event took place off the coast of Antarctica, where an iceberg about the size of the city of Chicago had broken apart from the landmass it was connected to and exposed the underwater world beneath Antarctica's thinning ice. Glaciers have raised alarms about the urgency of climate change. Scientists went to where the iceberg had fully been and dove deep into the waters to see what was in them. And here's a hint, that's where they found a whole lot of things. For example, they found sponges, giant sea spiders, ice fish, octopuses, huge corals, anemones, and deep-sea jellyfish, just to name a few. To be fair, the scientists in question knew that there were going to be some species living down below the watery ice shelf, but even they were surprised by the diversity that was revealed to them. And there was definitely more they found as they kept on exploring. This wasn't just some kind of scattered species, though. It was a full-on ecosystem of life that was doing just fine within the waters of the continent. To some, they may look at it and say, well, how is that possible? While others, though, would look at it and say, what else is out there beneath the ice and snow that we don't yet know about? Both are great questions, to be honest, and the only way to get those answers is to head there yourself and find out. Number 17. Hidden landscape. The first entry may have honestly been a perfect prelude to some of the findings that I'm going to be talking about in this video. For example, you may have wondered what the rivers do as they flow from one part of Antarctica to another. After all, they have to go through snow and ice. And that's what brings me to this next entry. Researchers in 2023 realized that the underground river system is doing more than just flowing into the ocean. It's cutting certain paths through the ice itself, and in one case it was carving out an area so big that it actually became its own ecosystem. In fact, this ecosystem is so big that it's apparently the size of Belgium, like as in the country. But wait, it's still not the most shocking part. The most shocking part is that the landscape has been around and untouched by outside forces for about 34 million years, which goes to further prove just how old the river system is. The area, stretching across 32,000 kilometers, was once home to trees and forests and probably animals. This frozen wasteland apparently once had a booming span of greenery and life for many years before the climate then shifted and it became the cold and barren place that we know it is now. So then, how did scientists find this cut-out landscape? They had to have planes go up into the air and then used radio waves to cut through the ice and snow from above in order to see everything that was below, which is actually a classic technique to get answers about what's below the surface of any place. It's also been stated that because of global warming, the landscape is now at risk, which means that we could all lose a potential haven in the continent because of us. And we really shouldn't be cool with that. Number 16. Warm subglacial caves. Now, the thought of Antarctica being any level of warm just seems to be ludicrous upon first mention. It's one of the coldest places in the world, especially the further inland that you get. So then, how could anything not man-made be suddenly warm? The context is always key, as has been proven, and the answer lies within the subglacial caves that exist beneath the surface. You can see the end down there, the depth of the ice. These caves, unlike the ecosystem that I talked about before, were not carved out by rivers but by volcanoes that lurk beneath the surface. These volcanoes are still active and they have steam which permeates the cave areas and actually heats it up while also carving out a nice space for the things inside. It's about 27 degrees Celsius, which makes it pretty warm. Scientists have been able to get soil samples from the caves, and what they found was that life actually exists there. Some of it may be small, like microbes and algae, but there have also been genetic samples that have not yet been fully identified and don't seem to be the same kind of creatures that live in the colder Antarctic climates. It really makes you wonder what else might be out there if you go looking hard enough. Now it's time for today's topic. During a routine aerial survey over the Weddell Sea on February 11, 2023, a Chilean Air Force reconnaissance team spotted something that defied explanation. While flying a Bell 412 helicopter near the edge of Larsen Sea ice shelf, pilot Captain Diego Valenzuela noticed a massive, serpentine figure moving just beneath the ice-cold surface. At first, it appeared to be a current disturbance, but as the aircraft descended for a closer look, the crew realized they were witnessing something alive. The creature, estimated to be over 60 meters long, had a pale, ribbed body and a head resembling both a giant eel and prehistoric marine reptiles. Valenzuela managed to capture several high-resolution images using the helicopter's onboard camera system before the creature vanished beneath the broken ice. More unsettling, the helicopter's instruments began to glitch during the sighting. GPS coordinates froze, altimeters spun erratically, and radio comms cut out for nearly a full minute. The crew returned to base Presidente Eduardo Frei Montalva visibly shaken. Chilean officials have refused to release the footage, citing national security and ongoing research coordination with scientists at McMurdo Station. Marine biologists are now quietly debating whether Antarctica's melting waters could be revealing ancient species thought long extinct. Number 15. Lake Vostok. I've already talked about ancient rivers and the ecosystems that they cut out eventually, so what else when it comes to water could we talk about? Well, there are currently many countries in Antarctica that are doing all manner of scientific work for one purpose or another. And as I've noted, many of them are drilling into the ice to try and see what's beneath it and to get core samples and snapshots of what life was like before Antarctica got cold. For Russian entities who were working at Vostok Station, they had been drilling into the ice and snow for literally 20 years. They were trying to get samples of the ice from the deepest parts of the ice shelf in order to see what readings could be made out of them. However, after that 20 years of drilling, they soon found out that their station was directly above a lake. Like literally a lake. They were sitting on top of an ice sheet that was covering a lake that had not been noticed in about 20 million years. How far the station was from the lake? Well, only about 4,000 meters. They truly had no idea that it was there, which makes that discovery all the more incredible. Many studies have taken place there since, including seeing whether or not there may be life in the lake. Number 14. The Endurance. While it may seem crazy to you that there are people willing to go to Antarctica to study things there, what's honestly more crazy is that people were doing it in the 19th and 20th centuries back when safety equipment wasn't exactly up to snuff. For example, Sir Ernest Shackleton was a famous explorer who had taken a ship called the Endurance and its crew to Antarctica for some adventures. This was in 1915, and the crew did make it to the destination, but that's when everything went wrong. Specifically, Antarctica decided to greet them by trapping the boat in some ice and then sinking it. The crew and Sir Ernest himself were able to get to a lifeboat and be rescued later on, but the ship would be a total loss. That was until 2022, when a different group of explorers were able to find the sunken ship in the frozen waters off the coast of the Weddell Sea. It was found 3 kilometers below the surface and has been resting there peacefully ever since it was sunk. The most shocking thing is, it's actually in pristine condition due to the icy waters and its environment. Number 13. Ice shelf sound. You may be surprised by how vocal that ice can be. If you think about it, it makes all kinds of sounds. When you make it, you drop it, when it moves across certain surfaces, and more. So given that there's a lot of ice in Antarctica, you can bet that someone there is listening to it to see what it might sound like. Sure enough, in 2018, some scientists were paying attention to a massive ice shelf during a rather windy day, and that's when it began to sing, or what sounded like singing. More accurately, the wind was going so constantly across the ice that it began to vibrate, and that meant that a variety of tones were being played for those who were listening to hear. Some of the scientists would even equate it to the sound of a flute. There were some tones going on with the sound due to how much pressure the wind was exerting on the ice and what the terrain of the ice actually was. Number 12. Giant fossilized egg. Fossils are something that are more common in Antarctica than you may think. After all, as I've touched upon, there was life in ancient times there and in current times, as I'll eventually get to. So there was a chance that fossilization took place over the course of time, and we just need to be in the right spot to uncover it. In this case, a mysterious 68-million-year-old fossil was found on Seymour Island off of Antarctica's coast. And when you look at this fossil, it's a little bit hard to tell what it is or isn't because of its deflated state. After doing some research, though, it was discovered that this item is actually a fossilized egg. We have found a few of these eggs over the years in different locations, but this was the first of its kind in Antarctica. Another thing to be noted here is that it wasn't small in the slightest. It was actually 29 by 20 centimeters, and the race was soon on to figure out what creature had borne it. The answer to that, it turns out, was a reptile, which makes it the biggest reptile egg ever found. Number 11. The blood falls. Now, here's a classic terrifying thing from Antarctica that I'm always up for talking about. This was found near Antarctica back in 1911 by some geologists, and the very act of seeing blood-red water pour out of an iceberg was enough to get a lot of people talking. Naturally, nobody thought that it was actual blood in the iceberg, but something had to turn the water red. And the answer is in iron and oxygen. It hasn't been oxidized yet, and as it spends time at the surface, that's when it becomes oxidized and leaves this beautiful red color. The pool of water that the waterfall naturally has and expels is rich in iron and has not been exposed to the air yet. So when an iron-like substance oxidizes, well, it starts to look like rust. The water rusts immediately upon contact with the air, and because of that, it turns it a nice shade of reddish-brown. It's still freaky, but at least we know that it's actually rooted in science. Number 10. The splitting ice shelf. While it may be true that we study Antarctica to learn about its wildly different past and the current state of life on the continent, we also use Antarctica as a kind of measuring stick for what's going on in the world right now when it comes to climate. After all, with temperatures rising across the planet and affecting weather patterns in a variety of ways, it's absolutely vital that we take a look at a place that is literally full of ice and see how well that it's doing. And here's a hint. It's not doing all that well at all. Over the last 5 years alone, people have seen multiple icebergs break apart and start floating freely in the ocean, some of which were the size of a massive United States city, which includes one that I talked about earlier. Then there is the ice shelf itself, which is slowly but surely breaking apart, but there's no reason to think that it's going to slow down anytime soon. The more that the ice in the shelf melts, the more water will be poured into nearby oceans, and that's going to cause problems down the road as the ocean levels of the planet as a whole rise and consume the land masses that we live on. Number 9. Massive ice tunnels. Remember earlier when I was talking about the rivers that were flowing through the ice under the surface of Antarctica and that they were going out into the ocean? One thing that I failed to mention until now is that the tunnels that they exit from are much, much larger than you would expect. You have to remember, these things have been made over the course of millions of years, and between that and natural melting due to other sources, you'll sometimes get exit tunnels that are about the size of the Eiffel Tower in France. For context, that's about 330 meters. The tunnels are only a few meters smaller than that, but the fact that they're nearly as tall in the first place is absolutely amazing. And it just leaves you to wonder how many of these tunnels are actually out there in the boundaries of the continent. Number 8. Gambertsev Mountain Range. Moving on to something that is actually cool about Antarctica, we'll now discuss the Gambertsev Mountain Range. Some of you may look at Antarctica's map or pictures of it and likely say, what mountain range are you talking about exactly? The Gambertsev mountain range is one that you'll not ever see on a standard map because it's actually not visible on the surface. Instead, it's about 2,700 meters tall, but also buried by about 600 meters of snow and ice. What's even wilder is that these mountains are believed to be over 1 billion years old, making them some of the oldest on Earth. Scientists think they played a key role in the formation of the East Antarctic ice sheet, which is one of the largest ice masses on the planet. The range is also incredibly rugged, with peaks and valleys that resemble the Alps, even though they're completely hidden. Using radar and seismic technology, researchers have been able to map the range in stunning detail, revealing a frozen world that's been untouched for millennia. This is a full-on, fully covered-over mountain range, and it's pretty cool. In fact, there are some who thought that it was an impossibility, but scans of the area where the mountains are prove that it's absolutely no joke. Equally as important is that this is a long mountain range, about 200 kilometers in length, which should give you a sense of just how much snow and ice are needed to cover it up. Number 7. Mud-rise polynya. Given everything that I've shown you in this video, you may think at this point that there wouldn't be anything odd to find in Antarctica that would throw people off. But if you're here on the thought trail, you know better than that by now. For example, there are situations that can cause massive holes to form in the surface of the icy continent. In 2017, one called the mud-rise polynya happened, and it freaked people out because they were left wondering why there was a giant hole in a random place in Antarctica. The answer is timing and science. What made this particular polynya so fascinating was its sheer size, spanning thousands of square kilometers, making it visible even from space. Scientists believe that these holes play a crucial role in ocean circulation, as they allow warmer water from the depths to rise and mix with the colder surface water. This process can have significant effects on marine ecosystems, as it brings nutrients to the surface, supporting the growth of phytoplankton and other organisms. However, the reappearance of the mud-rise polynya also raised concerns about how climate change might be influencing the frequency and size of these events. The hole is actually nothing new, and that's why it's called the mud-rise polynya, as it was first found in 1974. Then it was quite literally covered up until being exposed once again decades later. Polynyas are holes that are caused when ice and snow are literally blown away by wind and other factors. It may not happen often, but when it does, it is certainly noticeable. Number 6. Iceberg A76A. If you're still not in the believing mood about why people need to be careful about the ice in Antarctica and beyond, well, allow me to tell you about Iceberg A76A, which had a certain event take place in 2023 that made everybody nervous. The iceberg in question was the largest iceberg in the entire world, with a mass that was twice the size of Los Angeles. It broke apart from Antarctica and then shattered itself into several chunks before dispersing on the ocean surface. What made this event even more alarming was how quickly the iceberg fragmented, highlighting the increasing instability of ice shelves in the region. Scientists noted that as these massive icebergs break apart, they release trapped freshwater into the ocean, which can disrupt ocean currents and salinity levels. This, in turn, could have ripple effects on global weather patterns, potentially intensifying storms or altering seasonal climates. Additionally, the sheer size of the chunks poses a navigational hazard for ships, as even smaller pieces can cause catastrophic damage if struck. Having such an event take place is both complicated and terrifying all at the same time, especially since the icebergs could have a serious effect on ecosystems under the waves. Not to mention, they could crash into something or something might crash into them. Number 5. Antarctica Pyramid. Now, I've done my best to avoid such things because Antarctica does honestly have a whole lot of real and genuine things to offer when it comes to science. But it appears as though some people are just not happy with that. There have been plenty of claims over the years that there are pyramids on the surface of Antarctica. I've talked about this in other videos in the past, and that belief is emphatically false. The reason that this can be proven is simple. They're not pyramids. They're simply mountains poking up out of the ground. In fact, these pyramid-shaped mountains, known as nunataks, are a natural result of glacial erosion, where the ice carves away softer rock, leaving behind sharp, angular peaks. Geologists have studied these formations extensively, and their composition and structure align perfectly with natural geological processes. The idea of ancient civilizations building pyramids in such a harsh and uninhabitable environment is not only improbable but also unsupported by any credible evidence. While it's fun to imagine hidden secrets beneath the ice, the reality is that Antarctica's true mysteries lie in its unique ecosystems and geological history. There are mountains that have the shapes of a pyramid, but as many experts have pointed out, it's not an uncommon thing at all. There are pyramid-shaped mountains in other continents, and this one just so happens to have caught the eyes of people because of where it was discovered. There's no conspiracy here, so we should just move on. Number 4. Hidden World. Now, the last entry may have scared you just a little bit, so now I'll take things on a more positive path via a hidden world that was found in Antarctica back in 2022. I teased before that rivers below Antarctica's surface could very well have life. We just needed to study it and find out for ourselves. And we did. In 2022, after going 500 meters below the surface of the snow and ice, a hidden world of life would be discovered in the river itself. and there's footage of the creatures swimming around in it. What made this discovery even more incredible was the sheer number of amphipods thriving in such an extreme environment, where sunlight never reaches and temperatures are freezing. Scientists were amazed at how these creatures had adapted to survive, feeding on organic material carried by the river's currents. This hidden ecosystem also raised new questions about what other forms of life might exist in similar extreme environments, both on Earth and potentially on other planets. The discovery has sparked a wave of excitement in the scientific community, as it opens up new possibilities for studying life in the most unexpected places. What they actually found were creatures called amphipods, and much to the surprise of the scientists looking for them, like I said before, life finds a way. Number 3. Simultaneous polar heat waves. Hopefully, you know that Antarctica has a relative on the other side of the world known as the Arctic, and back in 2022, there were some strange phenomena going on at both areas at the same time. Specifically, they were getting hit by random heat waves. Due to that, temperatures could reach up to 47 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius higher than normal. This sudden and extreme warming caused significant melting of ice sheets, leading to a noticeable rise in sea levels within a short period. Scientists also observed unusual shifts in wildlife behavior, with some species struggling to adapt to the rapid changes in their environment. The heat waves even disrupted the delicate balance of ecosystems, threatening the survival of certain cold-adapted organisms. These events served as a stark reminder of how interconnected the polar regions are with the rest of the planet's climate system. So then, that left a lot of people scratching their heads and asking what the cause was. Well, some storms, of all things. A high-pressure storm on one side and a low-pressure system on the other went toward the locations and brought serious heat into them. And because of the nature of their composition, they actually further trapped the heat inside, making the situation potentially worse in the long run. This is terrifying for a variety of reasons that I mentioned before. If these places rapidly melt for whatever reason, we are going to be the ones paying the price. Number 2. Emperor Penguin Colony. I mentioned March of the Penguins before, but now I'm going to be talking about a penguin colony. While researchers are always looking for new life on Antarctica, there's also nothing wrong with studying the life that we already know is there. In this case, I'm talking about penguins and the many colonies that they have there that they need to sustain their population numbers. In 2023, scientists were able to find one of the most inland colonies ever, showing just how far the emperor penguins would go to ensure that they can breed. What made this discovery even more fascinating was the harsh conditions the penguins had to endure to reach such remote areas, with temperatures dropping to as low as -60 degrees Celsius. Researchers also noted that the colony had developed unique behaviors to adapt to the extreme environment, such as huddling in tighter formations to conserve heat. The discovery of this colony has provided valuable insights into how emperor penguins are responding to the challenges of climate change, as their traditional breeding grounds are becoming less stable. This newfound knowledge could play a crucial role in future conservation efforts to protect these remarkable birds. They're going to be watched over so that nothing will affect their habitat and breeding grounds, and the last thing that anyone wants is to see a headline about how penguins are almost extinct. Number 1. Fossils. I mentioned earlier that fossils are possible to find on Antarctica, and in this case, back in 2016, a treasure trove of fossils were discovered, which actually date back to 71 million years ago. What surprised scientists who made the discovery was the wide variety of fossils that were found. Among the discoveries were ancient plant fossils, suggesting that Antarctica once had a much warmer and more hospitable climate. This evidence points to a time when the continent was covered in lush forest, teeming with life. Additionally, some of the fossils revealed unique adaptations in creatures that lived there, hinting at how they survived in changing environments. These findings not only provide a glimpse into the distant past, but also help scientists understand how life evolved in extreme conditions. There were reptiles and dinosaurs and ocean creatures and more. They even found bones that have been ancestors to our modern-day ducks. Science can attest to how there have been many other fossil findings in Antarctica over the years, which highlights just how much life existed in this place once upon a time and how that influenced what lives there today. That's a wrap on the fascinating continent of Antarctica and the incredible discoveries that have shed new light on this mysterious place over the years. Do you think some of these findings are genuinely eerie? Or do you believe people just need to broaden their perspectives on what's happening there? Maybe you've heard of other mind-blowing discoveries in Antarctica. If so, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the other amazing content popping up on your screen, and I'll catch you next time.